Well, here's the deal.
Okay.
I've noticed that the meeting here, whoever is speaking, John or Martin, your face actually pulls up on the full screen, which works fine, you know?
Yes.
So we're good with that. And so welcome, John.
Well, that's what I told me, you know.
Yeah. Welcome, John and Martin. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. What I'll do is I'll just get started here. And my name's Tim Danbrook, and this is Georgina Speaks. And we're here to speak today with John McLean. He's a past counselor, past department head in the town of Georgina, regional or leisure services and recreation, I believe. And and a 40-year history of his entire adult life in dedication to our community. And for that, we're extremely grateful. And Martin Nash, who's just been kind of the conscience of Georgina, moving around the community for 45 years as well. And the two of them actually spent a fair bit of time together as young guys. So here we are.
So fire away there, bud.
Okay, so what I wanted to discuss today was the circumstances surrounding the shoreline community that is the subject of the shoreline jurisdiction plan and has been since 2016 in its inception. And just a bit of background without getting too into the weeds. There was a bylaw brought in 2015, which would have been, and as it was drafted, was exactly the same as the historical bylaws of about 40 years. In other words, it was a bylaw to incorporate all the rights, uses, what was allowed, cooperational policy between the town and the shoreline community as it had always been. And then somehow this council got a hold of it. And when I say this council, I don't mean it scurrilously. I might think it, but I don't mean it scurrilously. But they did get a hold of this and secured the services of a law firm, whatever the name of it is. Andrew Biggert was the lead on this in terms of their process. Then with that, they formed an ad hoc committee, 2 or 3 years of consultation. And in the end, where we've ended up now is nothing really has been accomplished. Everything's still in the planning stages, apparently, according to the town. But they just unilaterally decided, okay, we're not going to grant permits anymore. We're kind of going to do whatever we think we should need to do. And maybe they think they need to do it, but they haven't done it legally. And apparently, it seems as though they've actually taken some steps to step around people's rights and to avoid due process. So that's the gist. And beyond that, I don't really want to. Like, I guess, John, you have some experience with this. You were there in the days when they were doing the early stages of this problem. And my understanding, and when I go over the record, it says that it was always done in a spirit of cooperation between council and the residents with their own individual guidance from their solicitors and so on. Everybody kind of got on the same page. Does that make sense to you?
It does. That's the way it should be done. And if it's not being done that way, somebody better get a reality check.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a bizarre thing because I started going over the record and I was trying to figure out, like, how did we get here from there? And it seems as though when the lawyer came
Lawyers.
yeah, it's funny we said that at the same time, lawyers, eh? Well, you know what? Lawyers are like the union. They're necessary, but as soon as you give them too much power, they become counterproductive, and they seize the process. They take control, and then the will of the people and the good conscience of councillors that want to do the right thing and are told, well, you can't. That kind of summarizes the process, I think.
Martin, you've had experience. Lawyers will tell you what you want to hear if you ask them to.
Well, it depends how you frame your questions, but I think Tim's hit the nail on the head here. And Tim, you were just saying that the other day to me that there's been some letters back and forth with regards to the tenant or the property owner's rights. Could you maybe just go over that a little bit? When you said it to me, I was a bit shocked.
Yeah, let me just get a little bit more light going on my picture there.
Yeah.
That might,
we don't want you half.
Yeah, well, I don't know who's making the accusations. Yeah, I'm just kidding. So anyway, yeah, the discussion we had the other day is was regarding. I've been trying to communicate back and forth And as always, when you get to these stages in this type of a conflict, the lawyers lock everybody down. And but it's actually, it's gotten to the point where everybody in the building up there needs the lawyer's permission to say anything. Like you can't even get just an answer to a simple question. And so I was trying to go back and forth, and I've divided the set of issues into two parts. One is the issues that I'm trying to deal with my judicial review, and that would be the historical evolution of where they are now and their process, and was it legal? And I don't believe it was. The separate issue is issues that are under the Municipal Act, namely permit applications based on zoning, permits being turned down as a result of policies that have been the same for 40 years, and now they've just decided they're not going to issue them, even though they've identified that legally they have to. But what they've done is they've devised a process that says, well, we can turn permits down anyway. So, and they identified they want to turn permits down because they want to take control of the shoreline. So the reasons that they're turning down, they've identified as, we don't want to go to the proper process because it'll give people rights. So let's go this process, and then it won't trigger any mechanisms whereby they get checks and balances and the right for review, all the normal stuff in municipal law that says councils have to be accountable. They've actually taken steps, literally taken steps, and they've identified it as, well, if we go that route, they can appeal and they have rights. If we go this route, we can just go this route and they can't do anything about it. And it's disgusting, I believe. And John, I think you and I discussed this a little bit too, no?
Yeah, we did. They could have way back when, and even now, if they really wanted to give the residents an opportunity to have their say in court, they can pass an interim control bylaw, and then it can be challenged. And if it was challenged, I really do believe that the town would not win. They are taking away the rights of residents. But again, yeah, in my old position as Director of Leisure Services, I felt very strongly, and still do, that the view of the lake is one of our biggest assets and must be protected. So they seem to appear to want to go a step further, though, and take property that may be owned by lakefront owners already, seize it, and sell it back to them, which is weird.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. That is it in a nutshell. And the thing is that, and here's the thing, that they have never done an R plan. And the reason is, if they did, then they would identify what they do and don't own, especially what they don't own. So they haven't taken any steps to identify that they don't own the majority of this. And in fact, the town lawyer tried to say, oh, I know we own 90% of this, and if you don't play ball, we're going to fence your properties off and tear your boathouses down. Like, just ludicrous allegations and actually threats. He sat in council chamber and threatened all the residents that were in chamber that night, thinking that they were going to be listened to in cooperation, as past councils have done. And they show up, and he says that. And that's at the end of a 2-year consultation that incorporated nothing that the residents wanted. It's pretty bizarre. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
Yes. No, Martin, you fire away.
Martin, you've seen the documentation of the infamous "we own everything" speech, and beyond that, their responses, which have kind of been, oh no, we don't know what we own yet, and their responses are all over the map. And then, yeah, I mean, so I don't know, but what they're relying on is, tough luck. You have no due process because we didn't pursue it, so you can't object. And we can just keep marching in the same direction as long as nobody can challenge us. So they've structured it in such a way, deliberately, so nobody can challenge them, to avoid giving people their rights. That's my take on it.
Well, I kind of look at it, and I don't understand that the lakefront folks have to prove that they own this property, but the town doesn't really have to prove that they own it. So I don't get that one. Well,
the history of it is that the town, they're claiming like new knowledge or something, and there is no new knowledge. This has all been known since 1978, when you yourself, John, if I'm not mistaken, sat on that council in that same room and said, these people have rights, and we And in the pursuit of, like you deferred the OMB objections to the original open space zoning. And it was the objections of these people in favor of discussions to resolve the issues. So it was these people, the town and these people, because they were the two parties that could have possibly had an interest, made agreements, permits were granted based on the structure that they laid out and agreed to it. And so based on those, so the town can't claim new knowledge about not knowing who owns what and whatever. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry. I tend to babble.
Well, no problem. The precedent was set back in 78 when John Rogers and I moved the motion to say, okay, stay the hearing and let's talk. And that's when council agreed to it at the time. And it's just been a lousy set of negotiations from there on overall, because the lawyers have, have taken the position that the lakefront owners have to prove it, as Martin said, rather than the town, which is, that's backwards in my opinion. But I think there's still a remedy for lakefront owners. I mean, because they're stopping repairs from being done on lakefront boathouses, etc., and even some houses that are on the lakefront that are in question, that they're forcing them to deteriorate. And then they can use the law to move in and tear them down if that ever got to a point where they were unsafe, for example. And that's wrong too.
Yeah, well, as always, John, you got right to the point. And no, I mean, it's true. That is exactly the point. That's the system that they devised to accomplish their goals without giving anybody any checks and balances under the law, which they're supposed to. And they actually took, and the point is, yeah, they've been refusing permits in recent years, but they identified, I'll tell you what's brought this all up all of a sudden. I've got, all of the defenses that we sued the lawyer himself for his famous interference with council's process, and we own everything. And when Councillor Waddington tried to say, well, why are we spending money on properties that we don't know we own? After the council and Biggert himself admitted, we don't know if we own any of these. When Waddington said, well, why are we spending money on them then? That's when he said, oh, I know we own 90% of these, and then he has admitted since is untrue, and the town's been backpedaling from. But right then and there, when Waddington was trying to have a proper discussion about it, council was, Biggert interfered with that, in my opinion. And I want to premise any discussion around that. The truth that I'm presenting in terms of what happened and my interpretation of it are two different things. And some in the framework of that is, this is allegation, not. So I just want to make clear, these are alleged. What he did is he did do that. He said, I know we own 90% of these and we can tear boathouses down and fence properties off if you don't play ball, much the same as Tony Soprano used to do when he was running his operations, right? So,
my question,
exactly the same, no?
Yeah, pretty well. I think it's a bit draconian, but I just wonder who oversees the council with these types of decisions. Is there something somebody a little bit higher up that you can talk to about that?
Okay, so
well,
John,
Tim's taking the lead in this whole thing.
Sorry, John?
You've taken the lead in this whole thing. You are asking for a review by Municipal Affairs and Housing, which is the governing authority over the municipality, ombudsman as well. But again, both are being pursued by Tim. And I think it's great.
John, you're like a municipal surgeon, eh? Like you cut right to the quick. And actually, though, well, the reason I say that is I just got off the phone like 15 minutes ago with the ministry, and the minister's office actually in pursuit of the request that I sent. And what I'm trying to do is identify something in the process that triggers a right to have them review it, because that's what the town's been avoiding at all costs. And in that statement that you just said, you mentioned the ministry in my inquiry and the ombudsman. And you and I talked about the ombudsman before, and confirmation from the minister's office is that if they got a referral from the ombudsman, that then they would definitely step in. And so you were, as always, you were right on the money that might be the next logical step. And so I'm gonna, we can discuss that later in terms of whether, if I could get you to help me a little bit on the history so that I make sure I get it right when I make a request for a review from the ombudsman.
You're pretty good at the facts, Tim, regardless.
I know,
You
but
don't
you
need
know
much
what?
help from me.
You know what? I was reading the record last night again. You know me, I'm obsessive, so I go back and I reread and I reread. And some of the stuff I read, I realized when I was reading it wasn't exactly how I interpreted it. I was right in what they were doing and so on, but in the wording, my view of what they're doing and how scurrilous it is, it just gets me going. And then when I'm reading it as if it says exactly that, when it doesn't say exactly that, but it says what means that. You know what I mean? I don't know. So I like to check myself, double check and triple check myself to make sure that when I get there, and the ombudsman, the ministry, whoever the the judges, so that when they read it, they're getting the same out of it that I am. And when I reread it, they very clearly defined the reason for not going with an interim control bylaw, which planning had already identified. They cannot refuse permits without one. They identified the reason for not doing it was because that would give people rights to trigger and it would hold up the town's plans. In other words, they already decided what they were going to do. The ad hoc committee was a joke. They patted everybody on the head. Oh, that's nice. And then they didn't actually incorporate anything from that 2 years of work into what they're doing now. And at the end of it is when Biggert made his speech. So, I mean, so what happened is, it's crazy anyway. Yeah, you go ahead, John. I'm babbling again.
Well, no, I didn't want to jump in, but in council's defense, there are, bound to not just to listen to the public, but also the advice of their solicitors. So
That is
I
the
don't think
problem.
any of them are lawyers, and they give due course to the lawyer believing what they may be saying to be true, and probably most of it is, but the recourse is clear. The interim control bylaw is the most fair process, and that's what they should do. Put their money where their mouths are and pass an interim control bylaw and give the residents an opportunity to fight them fairly.
Yeah, 100%. And the purpose of them taking the other path, as I said, they identified they can't refuse permits without that. And then they identified, well, let's just refuse it on ownership, notwithstanding that that's not an issue because they've known it for years and years and they issued permits on it. So they can't change their policy without changing, in writing. There's resolutions and everything that deal with this. So what happens is, Biggert outlined the legal said, well, we can refuse it on ownership because in order to challenge that, people would have to go to court and it's harder for them. So the purpose of going the alternative route was specifically to avoid giving people their rights under the proper process. Like, so whether the alternative route, even if it was legal, which it is not, they've identified we're going that route specifically for the purpose of avoiding giving people's rights and holding up their process. And that's just wrong. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Martin, what?
Well, yeah. I'm listening well here. I know,
but you're a lakefront owner. You've sold lakefront properties, your whole life. You know the problems they've been getting into.
Well, the one thing,
I don't know. I'd like
Martin. The one
I've seen.
You've been doing this for like 45 years. You've been licensed. You lived here and you've been running up and down the lake for 45 years as a professional in the area. Now, I would imagine you've dealt with a lot more title issues and conveyance of property, people's interpretation of what they're buying, that sort of thing. That's all in your bailiwick. So, I mean, the value of those properties is hinging upon the fact that these people have always had exclusive use. They bought their properties that way. And Biggert's misstatement, since admitted as a misstatement, severely has affected, what people can tell somebody if they have to sell a property or the value of the property. Even the assessment department classifies them as waterfront. So can you discuss a little bit about what people are dealing with?
Well, I've been around a lot of these waterfronts, and I think that when we've been selling them, I think there's a number of the ones on Lake Drive North where the people have been there for so long that they've actually done affidavits for a possessory title on some of these properties. Kind of, they may have a survey that shows that they own it, But you know, the lawyer's saying, well, that may not be good enough. And then, of course, now you've got declarations for possessory title as a layer on top of that. I think it's just it's a real legal mess. And as I think what you said earlier, if they do an R plan, at least they would have an idea of the elephant that they're dealing with.
Yeah,
Can you describe what an R plan is for anybody that might be watching?
Well, you know, just basically a survey that shows, you know, these properties on the water where buildings are and where there might be some a challenge of ownership. And you know, because if you don't know what, like, we got a big fight going on here, but I don't know how many people are in how many dogs are in it, and I don't know you know, how big the properties are and what the contentious properties are. We don't really know them. They're, you know, I think Tim put them into 5 categories, but I still think that they need to spend a bit of money on some surveying, and then they can either deal with each one of these individually, as Tim had mentioned. If you want to go to court, I guess you can deal with them individually, but at least you'll know what they are.
Yeah, how expensive is an R plan?
120
Well,
grand.
Talking about surveying the entire Lake Drive area, is that?
$120,000 is the R plan. Estimates are around. I talked to Ted Garden about this the other day, and another surveyor that had to actually put in. So they've had estimates, and they're around 120 grand. And to put that into perspective, they spent $120,000 on the waterfront, on the beach plan, which basically gave us our own survey that we already had back with some stuff highlighted on it and some catchphrases that make it sound really modern, eh? So that's, you know, wave of the future, that kind of thing, you know. It's, you know, it got me all excited, I'm sure. So anyway, seriously though, 120 grand they spent for that. $50,000 they actually spent for this lawyer to sit on that ad hoc committee and end up with the big speech, we own everything. So they paid that law firm $50,000 for that interference. That's categorical. To produce nothing. And then, so let me tell you what that lawyer's value to the council of that lawyer was. He provided this opportunity for them to deny everybody's rights and march to the finish line without anybody having had an opportunity to have the issues vetted. He's told them you can legally turn down permits without changing any bylaws or anything, because if you do anything municipally, they have a right to be heard. They have a whole procedural fairness doctrine that supports that they should be doing it in an open, transparent way. And they've done nothing. They did not report back to the committee for the interim control bylaw as they were supposed to. They just let it all go by the wayside, marched to the finish line, didn't make any decisions because they had already made the decision, we're going to take over the waterfront. And the way to do it is deny everybody everything, don't do anything, just deny. And then now, you know, a few years into that process, they're having an assessment done for safety purposes of buildings on waterfront. So that tells you they want to clean all those buildings. They want to get rid of the boathouses. They want, like, they've decided they want this to be a 3-ring circus. They want that 150-year-old residential community to be turned into a destination recreational tourist area. And it's disgusting in my opinion. That's just my opinion. And they did it in a very convoluted way, deliberately convoluted to circumvent people's rights. It's brutal. Like, it's just brutal. So to that end, I have a couple of steps that I'm looking at right now, but what did you think? Am I that far out in left field on that, John? My assessment is always emotional. My assessment is always emotional.
Yeah,
I get it. But, and I always spew it.
It's based on facts, so.
Well, so I mean, it is based on facts, and I shed the worst possible light on their actions, and their lawyer will treat it like what they've done innocently, whatever, you know. That's a crock. Anyway, you know, that's my.
Okay, but when you use the word they about council,
Yes.
I don't believe that every member of council feels that way, number one. I just think that council has been maneuvered into a box, relying heavily on legal advice that, in my opinion, and again, not a lawyer, haven't got a clue, but I know it's fair. And what they're doing isn't fair. They have the other remedies. They should be going that route, and they don't even have to do an R plan if they do that route. Eventually an R plan will have to be done, but The bottom line is pass the interim control bylaw, let the residents have their fight at the OMB, and they'll win.
As always, right, concise, the issue of council being put in a box, that of course, that's the most poignant issue right there, because there is a number of the councilors, Waddington tried to stink up for it, Biggert interfered with it. No, I know we own everything, that's why we can spend money. Rather than let council have a proper discussion about it, he shut it down right there. And then, Neeson, he tried to preserve the $2 square foot model when they were trying to discuss it. He got blown out of the water with that ridiculous appraisal rationale that Biggert gave that night. The rationale that said we have to have these appraisals for appearances sake, so that council can't be challenged. But don't worry, if it comes in at $1 million, they can apply all their information to it and bring it back down to $2 a foot. Like, why couldn't they just do it in the first place? It's ridiculous. And everybody knows it's ridiculous, but they wanted the appraisals. So it's ridiculous. Like the whole process, you're right. The lawyers and every piece of advice he gave was couched in a caution to the grave consequences of them not following his advice. Do what you want. It's up to you, but that's the box.
Remember, Rusty Russell, one of the experts in the field, he gave his opinion, and his opinion, he said, could go either way. So, it isn't a slam dunk on behalf of the town at all.
Well, no, and Biggert himself said that night on July 24th at the 2019 meeting, there would be no way of knowing what would happen if we went to court. So that's the whole point. They know that nobody's going to go to court because there's no solution there. They know that if they did it the proper way with an interim control bylaw, people would have a right to. So what they did was they developed a rationale that can say, and the rationale is new information has come available that makes them allowed to turn permits down under the existing, so they don't have to go to any differences in planning. It's just a basis, it's like it's ridiculous, but nobody's challenging it except, I can tell you, somebody is challenging it now, and I have some new insight from the minister's office in relation to a good process. So I'll talk about that in a second. Go ahead, John. I don't know if any of that makes
I
sense.
wanted to hear from Martin, actually.
Yeah, me too. Martin, you're not getting off the hook. You're like, what the hell is this?
I'm enjoying this. I don't get to say too much. It's great. And it's not like me.
No.
So you and Martin, you did some research. Go ahead, John.
No, go ahead.
No, you did some research, Martin, about the value. You searched some properties that were similar, like the value of the same property, direct waterfront, or one with a view of the lake, and the difference in values, and you found quite a difference, right? If I'm not mistaken, if I remember.
Well, yeah. Well, these days the real estate market is a little bit crazy, as we all know.
Yeah.
And it used to be, the waterfront might be $100,000 more than the one with the view, but these days it's probably $400,000 or $500,000 difference. Yeah. So we're talking big bucks.
Yeah, unless the exclusive use, if you have the exclusive use or you don't, the difference in value, and so that the difference in value would be a property on the back street that has a view of the lake is one value. The same property on there that actually has a waterfront is an extremely higher value, and that's what they're trying to turn these into, only properties with a view of the lake. Does that make sense?
Well, that's right. Yeah, there's but I'd say these days with the real estate market, it's a huge difference of values now. So I think you're going to see a lot more of the owners maybe going to court to get their permits and or some other things that they might want because it's worth their while now. Before it may have been $100,000 difference, and well, I'm not going to court. But if you're taking 500 grand away from me, I'm going to court.
Yeah, John. So
that's valid, but the truth of the matter is that some of the residents that are having their fingers pointed at by the town solicitor, for example, do have deeds that say categorically what they own. But if the town is taking the position that nobody owns it, that's, it's a hodgepodge.
Well, the town is creating a smoke screen and taking advantage of the confusion, and how they're doing that is There are some of those people, and they can get permits because they just produced their deed. The other ones have had exclusive use, possessory title is what they call it, and have had it for years, and it qualified in registry, and they qualified, they were the owners because they had possession of it. And even the town lawyer, John Hart, who's in Biggert's firm, provided, a rationale that says, a legal opinion that says indices of ownership is care and control of the asset, which is the property. And these people have had care and control. And he actually provided that. He was providing it for the Pefferlaw Dam. So I guess, I don't think he realized he was providing it for us too, but which was, afterthought. He might have thought twice about providing that, but it's there, I mean. So the urgency is the issue, John and Martin, the urgency, because in the absence of any challenge, they can spend another 2 or 3 years marching to the finish line of their plan and nobody having any right discussed. They haven't reported. They keep saying, well, we still got more information. We haven't completed our study. But they actually they decided already like 3 or 4 years ago, this is what we're going to do. And they're doing it with no checks and balances. It's disgusting. And so we need a process now to bring it to a head and make them accountable for what they're doing. So any ideas, John, on that? Shy of a baseball bat?
Never resort
Just
to
kidding,
baseball
just
bats.
kidding, just kidding.
I know.
Just to be
I
clear.
know. Again, the town definitely sees the lakeshore as an asset. A lot of it isn't theirs. They know that. They're merely trying to protect the visual aspect of a member of Georgina or anybody coming through could take a trip around the lake. It's a calming thing. It's beautiful. The properties, most of them are pretty beautiful as well. So it's like, I know the residents don't like to be on display with, the giant hordes passing their houses and lakefront properties, but the reality is the road is legal, at least the small portion of the road that we understand is legal.
Yeah, well,
So
actually, they couldn't even walk out there right now and point to where the road is because they never had a survey done, and they're avoiding doing an R plan, which every lawyer for the last 40 years who's gotten involved in this said the first thing the town should do is an R plan. But if they did it, they would identify everything that they don't own, and that's why they're not doing it. So that's my opinion, right?
I think the problem, if they actually do an R plan, they're going to see that a lot of the owners there are going to see, well, Harry next door owns his, why don't I own mine? And that's going to, and it's just going to bring up everybody's their rights to say, well, if he got a deed on his, why can't I get one on mine?
Well, yeah, it's a title issue with the land titles office. It's a clear issue, but in the past, prior to transfer to land titles, they didn't. That this was enough. Because they had exclusive use as acknowledged by the town, they didn't need it. They had everything that they needed. That was the system developed. And so I wanted to, while I was still having it in my head, because I lose things quickly these days. John, on the issue of what you were just discussing, the view of the lake and all that stuff, did the past councils not accomplish that with all the resolutions and stuff, which clearly identified 1.5 meters off the paved portion? The fences had to be restricted in their size, and that you could 50% visual so that you could still preserve. The boathouses could only be so high to preserve that. Like there was checks and balances put in place by past councils in conjunction, cooperation with all of these people who have cooperated with the town every time they've been asked to for 40 years. Did they not accomplish that, what you were just talking about, the view of the lake?
I believe they have, but the latest waterfront master plan doesn't say what you're alluding that they're trying to do. It doesn't say we're going to grab the land and tear everything down. It merely promotes the fact that it's a nice destination, it's a nice trip, view-wise, etc. But I haven't seen anything in writing on policy of the town saying that this is what we are doing. It appears that way. And clearly it does. Everything they've done lately appears that it's a grab.
Well, here's the
And-
thing. Yeah, here's what we have lately. I had 5 questions sent to me by the Georgina Post the other day that they had posed to the town, and the town answered the questions. He was asking, the Post was asking for my comment on the town's answers. And the answer, are you giving permits? Yes or no? No, we're not. If so, why not? Well, because of ownership. Okay, were permits available in the past? Yes, they were, blah, blah, blah. So, and they go on to say, well, we have new knowledge now, but because of the new knowledge that we have, we can turn, so if permits were given, what's changed? That they're not giving them now. That mechanism we're talking about, what's changed that says that you can deny permits now? Their answer to it is a long, slick, legal answer. So I know it came right from the lawyer's office. That's my, interjecting my own opinion there. But the answer was, we have more knowledge now, so we can use the same policy that we use for the rest of the town, which is you have to prove ownership before you can. So the new knowledge, what is it? So they're cagey. They got around it. So their goal, they're definitely turning down permits. That's new, and it's that's new, and they are turning down permits, and so they turning down permits. So they're not following. They're not pursuing the view of the lake. They're turning down permits on these properties. They're interfering with the quiet possession. They're treating these people like they don't own it now, and they lied. That's my opinion. They knew. They said right in the resolution, the bylaw that formed the ad hoc committee, one of the main things was to preserve the exclusive use of blah, blah, blah. Said it right there. They never did they never incorporated any of that into the follow-up. They maintained they were going to all the way through. And then in the end, for a bylaw that said that, and for a committee that spent 2 years working on that, they all showed up at that meeting where Biggert made his famous proclamation, expecting that, like their recommendations was what was coming that night, and nothing. And then he made that, so they just did it. You see what I'm saying? Like, they said we're doing one thing, but they were actually doing another.
Okay, you're a builder in this. You're a builder.
Yeah.
When you go in for a building permit, do you have to show proof of ownership?
Not traditionally. I've never, usually it's on their tax rolls, and they'll call you and say, well, how come it's in somebody else's name? And you'll say, well, because it just closed a week ago, so it hasn't changed on your records yet. And they accept that, and you go ahead, and people are, but the point is here, there's never been they've never actually made you produce a deed unless there was some issues. But here, there is no issues. They've always known what the circumstances were. And under those circumstances, they granted permits. In their answers to the Post, they said, well, now we have more information. There's new information. It's a crock. They're using an interpretation to facilitate a goal that they have, which is don't give these people any rights, because if you go the municipal process, they'll have rights, and then we'll have to justify our actions. It's checks and balances. It's normal municipal process. So,
Well, Tim, I'm glad.
Go ahead, Martin.
I'm glad you're on watch here for everybody, because it's just bringing a thing for me that like the Willow Beach Park would be one thing. I don't know how that ended. I remember it was just a couple of things, and then they started acquiring properties adjacent to the original little park they had there. And now look at it; it's quite the thing. And I think I believe that there was a lot of derelict buildings on some of the properties that they acquired, and it may have been a similar thing. I don't know this for sure, but it may have been back then with wells and septics that you couldn't really develop property very close to the lake anyway. So people finally just gave them up. And I don't know how they acquired, like the Conservation Authority acquired them. But I know the Conservation Authority gives us all kinds of grief when we try to get permits now on anything. And so they have a certain amount of leverage there. And I say, I'm glad you're on watch, because look at Willow Beach Park. I mean, you want that to go all the way to Jackson's Point. I mean, is that what ends up happening, or what?
Well, the funny thing is,
Somebody has that vision.
Yeah, we actually leased that land from the Conservation Authority. So technically what we're doing is leasing a large piece of property to create a park for people in Toronto to come up and have a nice Saturday and Sunday. And that's what we're doing with our tax dollars. So And I love out of towners. I know a lot of them. And so, I mean, this is not, I accept and I understand people like to go to the city. I love the fact that they come here and they mingle and they enjoy our amenities and all the rest of it. So there's nothing wrong with that. But the way that the town governs their actions, the way that they move ahead on plans that create a bunch of consequences, and they don't deal with how they're going to deal with the consequences in advance. They just do the plan and see what happens, and it's pretty silly. I mean, anyway, John, that's my
Well, I'm
rant.
thinking, well, I'm thinking, I don't know if there's a longer range plan that the town is looking at property acquisitions on the lake. But certainly if you take the lake part of it away from a resident, they're not going to be able to get as much for their property. So I don't know, I mean, maybe in some cases, if they are looking at acquiring properties, they can buy them for a lot less if they don't have any rights to their waterfront.
The issue of
Yes.
just go ahead, John.
Well, I totally agree with Martin. It's a catch-22 situation. If it's in their plan to add to Willow Beach, and for example, there is a policy that says the town will acquire lakefront land wherever possible if it's viable to the overall scheme. That plan was passed by council when I was there at the town as director of leisure. So you know, they aren't doing anything that isn't open and upfront.
Yeah, no, and they're right to do it.
And more than that, they passed a bylaw that said lakefront land that's in town ownership cannot be sold or should not be sold. So, you know, the desire, if you look behind the words in the waterfront plan, it looks like there's a desire to open up Willow Beach a lot farther, as Martin is alluding to.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing, and like you said, I mean, and they are council, they're, you know, and if you look over the history of it, their view of the lake, making it a nice destination for a walk or a run or a bicycle ride or a drive, I mean, that's been the catalyst of all of it, and that's fine. And with the and the issue of all the waterfront property ownership has always been contentious or unresolved. And then the two parties that could possibly have an interest, the town and the indirect owner, have agreed. Okay, Rusty Russell said it, Charles Luther said it, Linton Lecken Monteith said it, good old Patrick Fahey said it. Title is not possible here. So we need to either go to the courts, which would be a nightmare and nobody would know, or make an agreement to get along. And they did it. And for 40 years, and 7 past councils did it. This council decided to change direction, which they have a right to do. But my beef is they deliberately devised a system to circumvent everybody's rights. And to that end, as always, you're concise, John, because that takes me right into the next, where we're at now with the whole system. And I have, so my judicial review's there, but they're laughing at it because they can put it off for next year, you know, as far as the court process. I mean, the lawyer was like 2 weeks late sending me his response under the rules, like how soon he was supposed to. And then he just sent me a schedule that said, you know, I'm going to do something, you're going to do this. Like they don't care. He can play around in the court process, delay it as long as he wants, and that's fine. So to expedite matters, I discussed with my lawyer this morning about doing a motion right away for some interlocutory relief. In other words, to get a ruling right now on the legality of what they're doing as far as the properties themselves are concerned. And then as I said to you earlier, I talked to the minister's office this morning. And as you and I had discussed in the past, the ombudsman is a really good, they confirmed what you said, and that is that the ombudsman is a very good checks and balances person because he has the right to make referrals to the different people that are responsible for the different ministries and so on. And the minister's office confirmed that that might be the best, because he'll get a look at it, and with him, if he makes a referral, yes, this is something that has to be looked at, then they will step in. That's my understanding, and so I'm going to work towards that end. And I'll call you later and ask if you'll. I'll ask you right now for everybody, the whole world to hear. Would you give me a hand with that application if I needed it?
Sure, absolutely, no question.
I-
Yeah, you know, there are cults out there that use the law to harass. A municipality shouldn't do that.
Yeah,
That's right.
it's like, yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%, John, and my heart's with you on that one, 100%. Martin, the hell are you thinking?
About what?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you're a real estate, you have a history in real estate. How much is this affecting your waterfront people? Like people that you know, people that, like you've been dealing with this. How are these people
Well,
feeling?
it's very confusing, and you know, I've been actually involved in a few waterfronts, just kind of trying to give some evaluations, and it's so confusing. Most people, you know, unless they've been really fighting with the town, they haven't got a clue what's going on. And as soon as you start talking some of the language that you've been talking today, you know, they glaze over pretty fast. So it's very, very confusing, and it's really hard on us because you know, we have errors in emission insurance and all that kind of stuff, but we don't know, we really don't know how to deal with these waterfronts. Again, we can just say, okay, put everything out on the table. If you've got possessory documents, you've got any kind of surveys, you've got you know, anything that you think would be on your side to prove that you have some ownership there. Now I got to try to sell that to somebody. And then so when you go to try to sell it to somebody, say, well, do we own the waterfront? You go, well, I got this stuff here, you know, and it makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
Martin, what's the definition of riparian rights?
Well,
Do you know?
well, I have read it a long time ago. I think Tim read the definition.
Tim?
So he might be a better one to ask.
Riparian rights. So if
Well,
everybody that's been maintaining property, the lakefront property,
yeah,
they all should be able to apply for quit claim deeds.
right. Well, that's to do with the Ministry of Lake Bottom and Shorelines. And what happens is
Okay,
the riparian rights go to the adjacent landowner. In the event, and it says right in the Riparian Rights Act that where the road meets the water, the town has the riparian rights. And then it says save and accept. There's a save and accept clause where other arrangements have been made. So where the road meets the water, the town does have the riparian rights unless Joe across the road 5 years ago applied to build a break wall on a dock, and the town consented to the riparian rights being granted to them by the ministry. In other words, save and accept other arrangements that have been made. They've given up their riparian rights. And all those categories can be looked at when the time comes. If they did an R plan, Ted Garden described to me the other day what would be on an R plan. And the entire history of that stretch of property and shoreline would be on in one picture. You could look at it. The docks, the boathouses, the history of it, the original shoreline, where the shoreline is now, where the original road was intended to be, where is it now, like all that in a glance. Then all the solutions would come because you look at it and you know what it is. But the town deliberately hasn't done it because they want control of the waterfront, and they're never going to do it. That's the point.
but if an owner has maintained property for some act that says over a certain period of time, I can't remember the number of years it is, but it's a prolonged period of.
Yeah, 10 years.
Okay, I think it's a little longer now, but I could be wrong. But anybody can prove that they've maintained the lands, then they can apply for a quit claim deed.
Well, it's what it is. It's called qualified.
Why doesn't everybody
It's because, as always, the town relies on the fact that it's quite expensive actually, because it's called qualified title. So there is the old possessory title where you just put the stat deck and you drop the deed on title and you are the owner. That was converted into land titles, and a process was put in place to replace that. And the process is identify anybody who may have an interest, notify them, and then once they've been notified, like there's a process in land titles where you can perfect the possessory title and then establish a deed for qualified title. There is a process, but it's
okay, but look at the other side of it. Okay, if everybody put in quit claim deeds,
yeah,
and can prove the true use of the property. The town's never maintained it. What the areas that we're talking about people have used it for their own private purposes
Right.
for decades. Okay.
Yep.
So then the town, conversely, would have to prove they own the land.
Well, they would have to prove, number one, that people don't, and they can't. Nor can
Well,
they prove that they
no,
do. Yeah.
no, they have to prove that they own the land.
To turn down
Otherwise, they have to.
the permit issue, to give the permit or turn it down, they have.
Not a permit.
Just,
Talking about
I
claiming
get
the
it.
land.
No, I get it. So if you can get it, well, nowadays, the only deed that you can get is qualified title in land titles. And the path to that, there's a checks and balances process for doing it. I'm in the middle of helping a couple of people do it right now. And you prove the unbroken chain, which is easily to prove here because they've always had possession.
Right.
And then you establish that it was in place before the land title system changed in 1992 or 2002, 92, I believe it was, whatever it was, when the system changed. If you prove the 10-year unbroken chain prior to that, so you're establishing a clear possessory title situation, and then there's a way of perfecting that into land titles. So then the first thing you do is you establish that, and then there's a protocol in place for notifying historically, the same as, when they do a title search for clear title, just the old registry office, they go down over the years. A mortgage was put into place in 62, then it was discharged in 64. So they establish what was on and what's been left. And then whatever's left at the end is the impediments, right? So I don't want to get into the weeds so much, but what it is you have to establish who could ever possibly have had an interest. And then there's a protocol for notifying all of them. And then once nobody imposes a claim, once you've notified everybody, then you're left as the owner. And then they give you a deed. It's a process, but you know what? Actually, it's funny. I'm going to establish a set of people that lake owners can call and put them in a position to do a lot of the work themselves, so they can get this done for less than $5,000, where they can get clear title of their property. I'm working on a protocol for it.
Yeah, that would make sense, Tim. I just throwing a little wrench into some of this here. That I don't think you can take any town property or government-owned property, without you just can't do it. Just by I don't even think possessory-wise either. If they can prove ownership, they own it. And you can't.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another one of the town's red herring. We're not talking about town property. We're talking about the land beyond the road allowance, but they say it's road allowance when it isn't. It's beyond the road allowance. So they mix it all up and they throw something like that at you, which is just bullshit. If it's on the road, if it's the road, you can't, there's no expropriation. There's no possessory title. There's no, that you cannot the old squatters' rights, which used to be, and then it became adverse possession, and then it became possessory title or whatever it is, there was a law put into place that you cannot, there is no such a thing as squatters' rights on municipal property. There were,
That's right. Yeah.
But the majority of these are beyond the road, and they won't do a survey.
Right.
They won't do an R plan because that would prove it. They ought not to be messing with people's property when they've done nothing to prove that it is the road. They're saying no squatters' rights. You don't need squatters' rights. You're not squatting on the town road allowance. They can't even point to the road right now, and they're messing everybody else up. Like, that's insane. Sorry,
Well,
I get a little.
most places they can point where the road is. There's this whole area of quasi jurisdiction right now,
Right.
but the rest of the roads, the rest of Lake Drive, it's a standard delineation that they can prove where the road is.
And so then they can also show where the road isn't. In other words, they know what they know what they shouldn't be messing with, but they're deliberately not getting an R plan done, circumventing people's rights to go any kind of a municipal process of checks and balances to achieve their goals. And that's reprehensible. I don't care how and the lawyer has got counsel in a box thinking that not only should they do this, they have to do this because of, if they don't, here's another point, John, maybe you could help me out with it. They're saying because if somebody falls down on that property, they're going to sue the town based on that the town owns it. Now, about 300 lawyers, Rusty Russell himself, nobody else could seem to be able to clearly identify that the town is an owner. How the hell is some guy who falls down going to do it in court?
They aren't.
No, it's ridiculous. It's a red.
It's a moot point.
It's a red herring. It's a red herring that he used to make council do what he thought.
Afraid.
Yeah, afraid. Exactly right. Well,
Good
The
point.
big liability is the liability. Look at the first three letters that sound like another word that's a lie.
yeah. Well, I think we probably made enough allegations for one day. Martin, do you have any allegations? You want
We're up to an hour.
Yeah, okay. Then, I haven't seen a clock. So you're right. So,
Allegations go fast these days.
one thing.
What'd you say, Martin?
I said allegations seem to go fast these days. We've got at least a half a dozen in there in less than an hour.
Well, the one thing I want to do
good.
is, I want to clearly, if you own a waterfront property, you own a waterfront property until the town proves that they don't. If they're refusing you a permit, we're working on a process to make them responsible for that. And we'll keep the waterfront people apprised of how we're making out with that. And hang in there, justice is coming, and we're working on the best way to get it as soon as possible. So, John, did you have anything?
Good for
to add
you.
to that?
I want to say something. You are spearheading this. You've done a fantastic job. You're a wealth of knowledge, and the residents that are concerned about this owe you a lot. They really do. And before I say bye-bye, I'd just like to wish your brother Jerry a happy birthday today. He's 74 years old today.
Thanks for reminding me, John. I'd have been in shit if I didn't get a hold of him. I'll get
You
right
better
on
call
that.
him.
Yeah, right after the
Yeah.
podcast, I'll get right on that. And well, thanks for that, John. If you want to say goodbye, I'll move into my response on that.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Hang around. So, Martin,
Okay.
any last comments?
No, not really. I enjoyed today's stuff. I'm learning lots every time we do this.
How is your grandson?
Oh, he's doing great. We're homeschooling him. He's having fun.
Yeah. So is he's still running your life? Is that the truth?
Yeah, pretty well.
Well, it was nice to see in your household that Barb, for the first time in her life, became second in command.
Yeah, pretty well.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I just I find that a lovely story.
Okay.
Go ahead. Did you have anything else you want to contribute to the conversation?
No, I'm good. As I just said, I just enjoyed today's deal, and let's just keep doing it. I think you're getting somewhere if you have a process that people can use to help themselves on their properties. If you get enough of them doing that, it'll become less of a problem as time goes on.
Thanks, Martin. So what I'm gonna, moving forward, we're gonna be sending some flyers out to the waterfront people to let us know what we're doing. We're gonna probably be asking for some funding, because I gotta tell you, I'm funding this out of my retirement fund, and I'm not that thrifty, so I don't have that huge of a retirement fund. And but I will spend the rest of it if I have to, taking this to the finish line, because justice is a weird thing, and when you see the powers that be abusing their powers and taking advantage of their authority over a large group of people, it's just disgusting. Drives me crazy. I don't know why, always has. And so I'll just carry on. Did you want to say goodbye, Martin?
Yes, well, you've always been like that, Tim, with regard to when you see something wrong, you immediately look up and look hard at it. So anyways, I'll just say goodbye and talk to you next time.
Okay, well, thanks, John.
Take care.
You good to go?
Yep, I'm signing off.
Okay.
Me too.
See you later. And thanks for everything, guys. We'll talk to you again really soon, and I'll catch you a little later, John.
Okay, no problem. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.